I think a lot of times in our healing journey, we go through a point where we take a lot of time to ourselves and self isolate to sort of focus and find the root causes of the things we've been dealing with and kind of just land back on our feet after feeling like we've been thrown around by emotions and whatever darkness or storm we've been going through. We just need to kind of find our footing again, and that's completely natural and it's normal. But also, I think what happens, honestly, a lot is we cling to the comfort of isolation and we believe that the peace that we're finding in being alone is a sustainable and real peace, when in reality, we're just kind of avoiding the world and we're turning our back to the world and the things we actually want. So, the theme of this sort of episode is that exposure heals us more than isolation. So only when we actually expose ourselves, we face the world, we expose ourselves to our triggers, our anxieties, the things that make us scared, all of the things that are related to sort of past trauma, all the things that are kind of holding us back and sort of, I guess, hanging out in our subconscious. None of those things actually become faced. None of them actually become transcended beyond until we actually live through them and we exist in peace while those sort of triggers, anxieties, and fears are present. So the type of peace and sort of emotional freedom that we're looking for isn't going to come when we're alone in our room, watching videos, reading books, meditating. Those things are great. Those are great practices and they can bring comfort and, even every day you can do those things within a certain boundary of time. But what really heals us more than anything in a quick way, too, it sort of zips up the wounds that we've faced like stitches, is exposure, right? And it's the most sort of uncomfortable, it's the most painful, it's the most awkward and tense. But being exposed to the things that we're scared of, being exposed to our anxieties and our triggers and whatever else, that actually heals them because we move through the sensation of them while not allowing them to deter us and not allowing them to send us back into hibernation. It's really easy to have peace when in isolation, but that's a ticking time bomb because the clock slowly starts to wind until that isolation becomes extremely harmful. All of your social skills slowly start to diminish. Slowly. And it's not going to happen quickly. You can spend a decent amount of time alone in isolation and figuring out what you need to do and using it as a useful practice of solitude. But what's going to happen is your social skills are slowly going to start to go down. Your tolerance for discomfort is slowly going to start to go down. Your sort of ability to face those same sort of thoughts and anxieties and triggers, all of that, your tolerance for all those things is going to slightly go down because you're not exposing yourself to them and you're not facing them on a daily basis. I've said this before in relation to anxiety, and that is it's similar to a spice tolerance, where if you never eat spicy food, your tolerance for spicy food may go down, rather than if you continuously eat spicy food, then your tolerance would go up. And this works for tolerance in any sort of direction. And of course, some people are predisposed to having higher tolerances and lower tolerances, whatever it may be. But the fact of the matter is we can grow our tolerance to anxiety and to fear, and we can find emotional freedom by actually encountering the things that make us anxious and scared in real life. So by turning our back to reality as a whole, by turning our back on life, we miss out on life. We allow our entire life to sort of pass by us. A lot of times when we talk about healing and we talk about the process of being free, we like to acknowledge the gentleness of it all, the sensitivity, the acceptance, showing ourselves grace. But what's often neglected is the bravery that it takes and how ugly the path kind of looks forward. There's going to be a lot of resistance on your end, consciously and probably unconsciously. And you need to move through that resistance because that resistance is not a sign of you moving along the wrong path, but rather it's a sign of you breaking free. It's the turbulence that happens as a result of you breaking free. Isolation can't save us because isolation only has a limited amount of obstacles, and the environment from which we find comfort in shouldn't be physical, but rather should be an inner state that we can carry with us anywhere we go. When we isolate in our rooms for too long, we find comfort in the room itself instead of the sort of mental calluses that we can build from trying to find comfort within ourselves in a growing degree of environments. And this is what actually makes us have peace in our everyday life. And this is what actually gives us that sort of freeing feeling within where we feel less anxious in more environments and more situations. And that's the goal, right? We want to feel less uncomfortable and experience less discomfort and more relaxation in more environments. And that can only happen through exposure. We have to expose ourselves sort of to the entire world and allow whatever comes into our path as we work towards the things we want in life. Everything that comes towards us, those things are meant to be faced. We can't turn our back to anything that sort of moves towards us in any sort of form, emotions, thoughts. We can't turn our back to them. We have to face them with bravery because we have to understand that by facing things, we overcome them. And we will never overcome anything by neglecting it and shoving it under the rug. We underestimate how powerful our awareness is, and we underestimate the amount of bravery that we truly have. And I think when we create this sort of perception of what we're capable of and what we're not capable of, this idea that we sort of bind ourselves to, we sort of live a self-fulfilling prophecy instead of the reality and the truth. And the truth is, you're far more capable than you think you are. And you can be more brave than you ever imagined yourself to be. And this isn't like motivational spiel. This is reality because we can train our minds to do so much. And overcoming the false ideas of you can't do this or you're naturally scared of this or this is always going to make you anxious. These are all ideas that we're giving power to. These are all systems in place that can totally be broken. And when we expose ourselves to life, when we face life, we start to build a resilience. We start to build a bravery and sort of mental fortitude that is very unlikely to be broken. Or rather, it takes a growing degree of difficult situations to break our mental fortitude. And that's what we want. We build this sort of relationship and trust with ourselves because we realize that the more I can push myself out of my comfort zone, the more my comfort zone grows. And that's the big thing we have to realize. The more you stay in your comfort zone, the more it shrinks on you and slowly sort of takes the air out of the room and slowly limits you and makes your life very unexpansive. I don't even know if that's a word, but you guys know what I'm trying to say. And the more that we go outside of our comfort zone, that zone of comfort, that zone of relaxation that we feel in everyday life, it expands. So we get to experience feeling at peace and feeling relaxed in more situations more often. And that's something isolation can't do. Isolation can't train you to deal with the stresses of everyday life. Isolation can't isolation can't give you the strength to carry the things you've always wanted. Only the experiences along the path of moving towards the things you wanted can give you that strength. That's why we often say it's about the journey, not the destination, because without the journey, without the things you learned mentally, without the exposure and tolerance of the journey, you wouldn't be able to handle the things you've always wanted. When we expose ourselves, we don't just expose ourselves to anxiety, triggers, and fear. We also expose ourselves to all the good things as well. You may think that isolation is sort of prolonging and avoiding the negative, but it's also avoiding the positive. When you're in isolation, it's impossible for anything to find you. Luck is not on your side when you isolate too much, because luck is simply a matter of being in more places where luck can find you. Luck doesn't just exist, it finds us. And luck is everywhere. And the more we avail ourselves to it, the more we expose ourselves to life and more situations and growing degree of environments, the easier luck will find us. That's the core of the message. So isolation, not only does it negate all the healing we have to do, not only does it void the sort of exposure needed to be the sort of grander and better version of ourselves, but also It neglects and avoids all the positives and all the blessings that can come as a result of being exposed to life. What we can do is we can treat isolation strategically. So after a lot of, let's say, socializing, after a lot of exposure and being out there, we can treat isolation in a very structured sort of way. We come back to our sort of solitude, we come back to our aloneness, and we meditate, we read, we find comfort, we use it as a sort of reward. But that's the thing, you can't get hung up on that comfort and that reward. After a long day of socializing, after a long day of putting yourself out there, you can reward yourself with a little bit of comfort zone isolation. But that comfort, that comfort that you find in isolation, it only feels that good because you're using it as a relative scale to the amount of exposure you just experienced. So what happens is you're going to start getting more anxious in your comfort zone if you don't expose yourself to a growing degree of environments. That comfort zone, your room, sitting at your desk or laying on your bed, whatever it is, if you do it too often, if you do it too much and you don't expose yourself and if you don't grow, what's going to happen is you're going to start feeling more uncomfortable even in your room. So there's really no physical zone of safety that you can cling to because eventually, if you don't grow, if you don't expose yourself to a growing degree of environments, what's going to happen is your comfort zone, your physical safety net that you've been clinging to, is also going to start to turn on you and sort of creep in on you. So the only real logistical thing that we can do, and it's also, of course, the better and more evolved thing to do, is to expose ourselves to life, is to put ourselves out there, make ourselves uncomfortable. We have to get used to doing difficult things because much of the good things that we want out of life is going to be as a result of going through something difficult. We have to drop this narrative that just because something is difficult, it's inherently this huge mountain that we have to climb. Rather, establish a framework that everything good is probably going to be difficult. So let's grow a tolerance to difficult things. Let's get to know ourselves in the face of difficulty. When we feel uncomfortable, when we feel like quitting, let's talk to ourselves then. Not talk to our thoughts, but let's see our natural impulses. How quickly do we want to run away and escape back into isolation and into our comfort zone? How do we move through that wanting to escape? How do we train ourselves to sit with that discomfort? How do we train ourselves to stay positive in situations where things aren't going completely our way? We have to understand and get to know ourselves in difficult scenarios so that when difficult scenarios arise, we feel more comfortable in them. And not the fact that we're prepared exactly for all of the spontaneous things that can happen, but rather we built a relationship with ourselves where we understand how we act when we feel like quitting. We understand how we behave when our mind starts to run and when we want to just give up and go back into our comfort zone. So we know how our body and we know how our mind is going to react. And we know that we only have to sort of be there for ourselves. The environment might change, the situations and the sort of nuances of what you're going through might change, but as long as you get used to being in difficult scenarios and as long as you get used to being there for yourself in difficult scenarios and moving yourself through it and guiding yourself through it, you'll always have that trust in that relationship that you have with the deepest, darkest part of yourself. So in exposure, we open ourselves to the reality of life. In exposure, we actually live because we embody a sense of openness. You can't walk the path if the door is closed. And if the door to your hypothetical imaginary comfort zone and room is closed, there's nowhere to grow, there's nowhere to go. Luck can't find you, blessings can't find you if you're always sitting in your room and you're never putting yourself out there. I said a couple times before that I look at manifestation as, a two-person dance. And I say that manifestation takes two to tango. So if you put yourself out there continuously, if you're always working towards the things you want, if you're always doing everything you can to fulfill your purpose, you're willing to go however outside your comfort zone, you're willing to go beyond any bounds because you want that thing so bad and you desire either emotional freedom or an accomplishment, whatever it is. If you're willing to push yourself and go outside of your comfort zone, then luck and manifestation will find you. because you're opening yourself to it. And your momentum creates a reflection in reality. Your momentum is always matched. The hands and the sort of bet that we put into life, the amount of chips that we put on the table and that we're willing to sort of put into life, into leaving our comfort zone and growing and evolving, the universe always sort of matches that bet. It's always a reflection of what we're already doing, what we're already capable of. So when we're exposing ourselves to life, when we're staying open, when we're facing it, we invite reality, we invite the universe to do the same and to meet us and match us with that same sort of spark and momentum. We invite new opportunities because we, as a being, we are a new opportunity. Every room we walk into, we are a walking opportunity because we are constantly exposing ourselves to life. So all of that exposure, all of those experiences, we as a person now are a foundation for new opportunities for other people and for reality. We are a walking exposure. We are a walking openness. And of course, this is something isolation can't create as an energy within us. Isolation can't make us the person that we need to be. Isolation can't give us that confidence that is not dependent on other people and not dependent on our comfort zone and all of the sort of things that our anxiety craves to be checked off for us to be comfortable, for us to be relaxed, and for us to be comfortable. Sorry, I just repeated comfortable twice, but we don't need that anymore because we've grown so much in our own sort of energy, in our own right, that we no longer need that sort of comfort to act as a babysitter and to act as a sort of limitation for what we're capable of. We always find a habit of dimming our light when all the conditions of a comfortable environment aren't met. And the key here is the main teaching is that you can embody that light that you have when you're completely comfortable, that confidence that you have, you can embody that pretty much everywhere you go. But you can't do that if you're hiding away in your room. Isolation isn't going to give you that confidence that you want. Isolation isn't going to give you the things that you want. And sometimes it's going to take doing things alone. Sometimes it's going to take doing things with people who don't sort of create that comfort zone for you. And that's okay. Because in the growth that you find through exposing yourself, whether it be alone or anything else, you find your deepest self. You find the self that you've been looking for. When you're no longer dependent on other people or a specific sort of comfort zone and environment to give you that light, to give you that confidence, you find your true self, the one that isn't bound by all these imaginary limitations. So as you move through your life, especially after listening to this episode, embody a sense of bravery and see that there's no point in not being brave. There's no point in exposing ourselves to everything that is possible. There's no point because what else are we supposed to do with our life? We can't hide away. And even if that sounds amazing, even if that sounds good in theory, that isolation forever isn't going to give you what you want. What's happening is you're probably hiding the fact that the things that you want, the desires that you have, are going to require you moving through discomfort. They're going to require you to be uncomfortable and to leave your comfort zone. And when we can't admit that, when we live in avoidance, when we live and cling to isolation as a foundation for peace, because we would rather do that than face the discomfort of getting and working towards everything we want, that's misalignment. But we come into alignment simply by leaving our comfort zone. It's overstated so many times, it's said so many times, but it's because it rings so true. And the comfort zone is one of the most unspoken about addictions. If you guys enjoyed this episode and you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you for listening. You guys can check out my books at shop-kinzer.com or on Amazon, Kinzer MB everywhere on all socials. And I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.